上当百年，欺世大官.
Hello everyone. We now continue from where we left off in our previous episode and tell the story of how Red Star over China came about. In 1933, the publisher Harrison Smith offered Snow a chance to make money, asking him to write a book about Red China and other subjects by the end of 1934. Snow gladly accepted this offer immediately. However, this plan was delayed until the early summer of 1936, when Snow, with the assistance of ching-ling and the companionship of fellow American doctor Ma Hyde, known as Shafiq George Haytham, took Song's business card and went to Yan'an. The following has been revealed in the official history of the CCP. It is claimed that during his stay in Yan'an, Snow interviewed Mao Zedong, Peng Dehuai, Xu Haidong, Zuo Qian, Nie Rongzhen, Chen Zihua and other Red Army leaders, and became the first Western journalist to cover communist-controlled area. In November of the same year, the China Weekly Review first published Snow's interview article entitled "Meeting with Communist Leader Mao Zedong," with his photo of Mao wearing an octagonal hat. It was found that Thomas Miller, a correspondent of the New York Herald Tribune in the Far East, founded the Miller's Review newspaper in Shanghai on June 9, 1917, and John Benjamin Powell was the chief writer and publisher from 1919. Snow's first job in China was this newspaper. The Miller's Review changed its name several times, and when publisher Powell died, his son Mr. and Mrs. Powell Jr. took over. Because the newspaper often exposed scandals of Jiang's government and supported the CCP, it was a miracle that the newspaper survived so many years until the CCP took over its power. After 1949, it was the only American-owned media allowed to be published and distributed in China. However, due to its whitewashing of the CCP and negative reports on the US in the Korean War, the paper did not find much of a market outside China and went bankrupt in 1953. The paper went out of business in June 1953. After having scolded the US for so many years, the Powell Jr. couple returned to the US for good. It is a great example of the predecessors for people like Hu and Ma. It is a job to scold the US, but then go to live a life in the US. It's just an interlude. Snow's articles on CCP leaders were also published in 1937 in Shanghai's Dami Evening News, Beijing's Democracy, and some newspapers in Britain and the US. The American magazine Asia also published his report from Red China, and the royalties earned made him a good income. When the opportunity came for a chance to win fame and fortune, Snow made a big plan based on those articles and reports. After 6 months of effort, the 300,000-word English version of Red Star over China was completed in Beijing in July 1937 and published in London, UK in October. In February 1938, the Chinese version, with a few additions and deletions, was published in Shanghai and became a bestseller at the time. What he didn't know was that the things he wrote about in the book was only what the CCP wanted, words of the Communist Party. And what the Maoists showed him was just a carefully polished and shiny donkey's dung egg, which conveyed the image of the CCP and its pre-designed drama to the world through his mouth and pen. As for the truth about Liu Zhidan being killed by Mao, as well as the head of the Communist Army in Shaanxi province, the hypocrisy and cruelty of Mao, the debauched private life of the CCP leaders in Yan'an, Mao's order to the CCP army to let Japan occupy more land, that is a true patriot. Otherwise it becomes love for the country ruled by Chiang Kai-shek. These pretend anti-Japanese general policies are only known by insiders. Snow certainly couldn't have known about them. During the Snow era, the CCP cheated the world. They first cheated the Western journalists by implementing the party's brainwashing techniques, which have been in line with the times. The book Red Star over China, authored by Snow, had a wide impact on the mainland and did the communists a great favor. Many young scholars read the book, became fond of the Communist Party, and defected from the national unification area to that nook and cranny of Yan'an. But it was easy to get in and hard to get out, and by the time many found out they had been duped, they could not help themselves and could not escape. This book also changed the initial perception of the CCP by the US and other Western countries. Mao and Zhou took advantage of the irony and began to use every opportunity to invite Westerners, including journalists, to visit Yan'an to package the CCP as clean and for the people, to gain sympathy, to seek rewards, and to cover up their fake resistance to Japan and real expansion. They really fooled the US empire. Eventually, the US government made a mistake and cut its support to the nationalist government after the victory of war, and even advocated a second negotiation between the CCP and the national government. It was only when the CCP sat up and revealed its fierce face that the US empire was too late. The CCP eventually seized power and began to plague the land of China and kill the Chinese people. For this, Snow and his book have an unshakable responsibility. In 1939, Snow again visited Mao in northern Shaanxi province, with the aura of being a meritorious member of the CCP, and was warmly welcomed. By February 1941, Snow was expelled from China after the national government banned his journalist privileges for biased reporting on the Wan'an incident. He broke up with his wife Helen upon his return to the US, but he hasn't given up painting the CCP and old Mao with oil and beauty. Snow returned to the United States in the flesh, but left his heart in Yan'an, and for decades afterwards believed that he had not misjudged the communists. In 1944, Snow wrote People on Our Side, saying that the Communist Party was still a player in the anti-fascist camp. In a speech, Snow also described Mao and the Communist Party as a progressive force for democracy in China, and in a piece for the National magazine, Snow even said that the Communist Party has given up on China's attempts to establish communism in the future. Now it seems that Snow was very sick at that time. By the late 1950s, Snow had published 2 more books on China, one called Essays on Red China, and the other, his pre-1949 autobiography called Journey to the Beginning of the Resurgence. After the establishment of the CCP, Snow became a guest of honor. He visited China in 1949, from October 1964 to January 1965. He was the correspondent for the French weekly newspaper, New Straight Talk, and visited China again, talking extensively with the people during his trip. But the secret he did not know was that all the people he met were arranged in advance. That's why Snow's book, The Other Side of the River, published in 1963, could call the tragic starvation deaths of tens of millions of people in China between 1959 and 1961 malnutrition instead of famine. At that time, the brain-damaged patient Xiao S. did not think malnutrition would starve to death tens of millions of people. Even if the CCP did not let you come to this conclusion, wouldn't you have any human physiological common sense? You can imagine what kind of facts Snow saw at the time. Otherwise, why did he continue the evil path of the Communist Party's accomplices? Here's the point. We are exposing a great hoax. Few people know to this day that Snow had never even been to Yan'an when he wrote his world-shaking A Journey to the West. Amazing, isn't it? That's all a gimmick. He was only in Bao'an, now Jidan County, a few hours' drive from Yan'an. The secret behind Westward Journey is that the person who reached and recorded Yan'an was Snow's wife at the time, Helen. The story was posted on the CCP official website in black and white. In 1991, the Chinese translation of Helen's book, Return to China, was published in China, and Huang Hua, then vice chairman of the National People's Congress, gave a preface. The editor-in-chief said that Snow had never been to Yan'an, but only to Bao'an and Jidan County, and that many of the episodes in the Westward Journey were encountered and written by Helen later in Yan'an. But now people only know about Snow, although the true joint copyright holder is with Helen. That's the end of our story. Snow visited China for the last time from August 1970 to February 1971, during the Cultural Revolution. At that time he was told that the US President Richard Nixon was welcome to visit China, and on December 18, 1970, old Mao beckoned Snow and said to him, "Who would have thought we could take over the mainland?" Snow replied, "You thought of it." Mao said, I do think about it, but I don't know if we can occupy it yet. It will not be counted until the day of occupation. Later the Japanese came again. That's why we say Nixon is good. Those Japanese are good. The Chinese Revolution without the help of the Japanese is not possible. I told this to a Japanese man, a capitalist named Suburo Nango. He always said, "Sorry for invading you." I said, "No, you have helped a lot with Japanese militarism and the Japanese emperor. You occupied half of China. The Chinese people all rose up to fight against you. We made an army of 1 million people and occupied a place of 100 million people. Didn't you help?" The most interesting thing is that this last trip to China's Cultural Revolution stimulated old Edgar Snow so much that Mao gave him the highest courtesy and let him go up to Tiananmen to review the Communist Party's national mourning procession. After this, Snow completely changed his view and finally saw that the old Mao he admired was both despicable and annoying. Therefore, in his later years, he was deeply sorry for having written A Journey to the West. His second wife, Louise Snow, after the 1964 Communist massacre, Snow went from being an old friend of the CCP to being the strongest supporter of human rights activities in China. That's the end of this episode. Please like and subscribe to our channel. See you next time.